Namaste, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining us on this Tuesday edition of The Right Stand. There were 90,000 soldiers who folded in front of the might of the Indian Army. Those that engineered a split in Bharat in 1947 found themselves sliced less than 25 years later. As these POWs went back home, they were mocked and scoffed at. Such was the humiliation that many never wore the uniform again. Those that did could never forget the insult. This pain, this insult is what drives the Pakistan deep state, its military establishment in its agenda to bleed India with 1,000 cuts. No matter what they do, that humiliation of 1971 haunts. The ghosts of those Pakistani generals of the past continue to echo that humiliation into the current line of generals who run the Pak establishment. Point is, barring a few wins here and there, enmity with Bharat has been a loss-making proposition for Pakistan, especially its military and deep state. They, like leeches, sucked American dollars for more than 3 decades, and now when Uncle Sam has exited Afghanistan, this blinded by hate and still hurting cause of the 1971 insult lot is firmly in the lap of the CCP and the PLA. Such is the ISI and Pak deep state's obsession with Bharat that they are on the verge of pawning away their sovereignty, and it is this desperation that is making them cling to the only narrative that is available, and that for them they believe works. It is the last straw that they cling on to, the Kashmir narrative. And tonight, straight from the horse's mouth, we bring you details of Pakistan's renewed Mission Kashmir blueprint in this Right Stand and CNN News 18 exclusive. So the ISI has further and once again reactivated Mission Kashmir. Why now? Because there is a fresh offensive amid the string of setbacks. Pre-2008, the ISI operated 80 plus missions in Kashmir and other parts of India. The military very low on funds currently due to A, the sinking economy, B, the FATF blacklist looming and money becoming a huge crunch. Of course, the American dollars drying up, Pakistan losing grip even in Balochistan and also Afghanistan, which they claimed a huge victory, but now it's bleeding them, it's hurting them. ISI for Tehreek-e-Taliban operations in Kashmir, but Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan is unwilling. They don't want to get into Indian soil. Also, Pakistan's new Kashmir blueprint says ISI is creating new terror nexus via the Islamic State of Wilaya Hind. So the Wilaya Hind, ISHP is what they're calling it, and in this they are now trying to give, Wilaya Hind has been given a list of targets in Jammu and Kashmir, this grouping. This grouping is what? It's just a clubbing of the Hizbul, the Jaish, the Lashkar Cadre, and put them all together and bunch them up rather than having different wings of Hydra, just create one big lump. Now, properties of Jammu and Kashmir, terrorists being sold to raise funds, and this is happening in interior. So, Sopore, Kupwara, some of the other regions where in the villages they are selling off whatever properties they have to liquidate to catch funds. That's what the ISI is telling them. Training of JNK youth to try and fight the Indian forces. So, this is something which they're trying to reactivate. But more importantly, China is keen on operations in Afghanistan and JNK to try and engage India on 2 fronts. So this is a question that rings right loud clear. Is the ISI right now being dictated by China? Let's go across to Sushant Sareen, Senior Fellow ORF, joining us, a Strategic Affairs Expert, and Major General Dhruv Katoch also joining us. So these details, Sushant Sareen, as I say, good namaste and good evening to the two of you gentlemen. Sushant, these details that we have accessed is from a retired ISI officer. A retired ISI officer has told our investigations editor Manoj Gupta these details. Now, obviously, we have seen a lot of this play out in the last 2-3 years since the abrogation of Article 370. But clearly, there seems to be a desperation. And this, somewhere, do you agree if I were to say, is the last straw? They're clutching on to this straw. Ye bhi gaya to khatam.
Yeah, Anand, I won't say the last straw just yet because I've been hearing this that terrorism sponsored by Pakistan has its back broken, it's on its last legs, it's the last desperate lunge of these terrorists, uh, and we've seen it continue for decades. So I wouldn't go to the extent you are going, but yes, it is very visible that they are on the back foot, partly because of the very robust Indian security grid in Jammu and Kashmir and other parts of India, partly because of their own bankruptcy and their own problems, and partly because of what you can call the blowback of terrorism inside Pakistan. So I think it's a combination of factors which has kind of forced them to backtrack a bit. On the China-Pakistan equation, I think that nexus is extremely well established. I don't think there's any doubt about it. In fact, somebody who's often appeared on your shows, David Devdas, who's one of our Kashmir experts, has been warning for more than 10 years now that the Chinese and the Pakistanis are acting in conjunction as far as Jammu and Kashmir is concerned. So again, this particular revelation in your report does not come as a surprise. I don't think the Chinese are giving instructions to the Pakistanis. I suspect that they are both working in collaboration to destabilize India in whichever way they can to pressurize India. Some of the other revelations are also interesting. They kind of are borne out by what we hear from other sources. For example, the Islamic State Hind province. Now, what has happened is that the Islamic State Khorasan has been limited to Afghanistan and to parts of the tribal belt and the Pashtun belt of Pakistan. Then they have formed an Islamic State Pakistan province, and then there is something called the Islamic State Hind province. And there's another outlet which is the Kashmir province kind of a thing. But it's basically the Hind province which is much more worrisome right now. But there are reasons to believe that the Islamic State is essentially an ISI sponsored, organization. It has very close links with the Haqqani network, who is also part of the Taliban. But, the Pakistanis are notorious for keeping some aces up their sleeve. So even while they were supporting the Taliban, there were very credible reports that the Pakistanis were also deeply in bed with the Islamic State terrorists in Afghanistan. Because this was going to be their leverage point. And the moment you see the Taliban take a somewhat stronger stand against Pakistan bullying, you suddenly see a spike in the attacks by the Islamic State fellows inside Afghanistan. So I think that's a game the Pakistanis have been playing. So this Islamic State Hind province gives the Pakistanis a plausible deniability and yet, keeps the fires of terrorism alive. So again, this kind of adds up. What does not really add up for me is this bit about the nexus between the Lashkar-e-Taiba and the Jaish-e-Mohammed and the others. I would be a little skeptical on that, partly because the Lashkar is not exactly a favorite group of the Taliban or of the Tehreek-e-Taliban. I know one thing for a fact, Anand, and again you will find this interesting. The Pakistanis have been trying to reach out to the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan even earlier, many years earlier, to try and divide them between the Punjabi Taliban and the Pashtun Taliban. And the Punjabi Taliban, they have been trying to direct to Kashmir. That included a bulk of the Deobandi fellows who were also attached to the Harkatul Mujahideen, to Jaish-e-Mohammed and some of these other groups. So, and we've seen a spike in attacks by these fellows in Kashmir. The Lashkar attacks have somewhat gone down. The Jaish attacks the Jaish has been far more active. So again, that bit adds up. What does not add up is the Lashkar getting into bed with the Taliban, the Tehreek-e-Taliban and all of that, because the Tehreek-e-Taliban and the Lashkar have had shooting matches between them, and while the